this is like the core problem. For the last 100,000 years, all human advancement has been human driven. And now we're decoupling humans from that advancement. And what does that mean for us? Like, what is our role?
Gertie Gallery at the minute. How's it like running, operating, curating a gallery space with no experience?
Look, I've got to be honest. It's challenging. There are certainly challenges about it that I hadn't anticipated. So when and this is a project I've been thinking about for 20 years. Like I had my the genesis of it goes back about 20 years when I started thinking about, I was in my early 20s and there was an opportunity to rent some space in Kensington, and I started thinking, what could I do with, what would I like to do with my life? What's something that's going to be meaningful to me? And I had this concept for a gallery space and music and a bit of this and a bit of that, and try to make a bit of a cultural hub. And then, of course, life happens. You end up in a career doing a lot of different things. And at the end of COVID, I found myself asking myself those same questions.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you reel it back in?
Yeah. And look, this place became available to me, and I just thought, this could be something I could resurrect that dream, and see if I could make a go of it. So
20 years ago, and we spoke about this. It'll be coming on 2 years now. I don't think it was fully realized 2 years ago. You had maybe acquired the space then, but I think it was still operating under a different umbrella altogether, right? 2 years ago?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And a lot has changed in that 2 years as well. We'll get on to how AI has played a role into that, because that probably wasn't something that you would be able to anticipate. I mean, obviously not. But 20 years ago, when it was a gallery space, and then your life had kind of just started doing its own thing, because you moved into industrial design. Take me through that, man, because you've worked on a whole bunch of different projects, working on different levels of design. And so how did that start off? Take me through that.
So, yeah, I was actually enrolled. So after high school, I was enrolled to do philosophy literature. And I was still, at that age, you're still sort of discovering yourself, right? And it was maybe 2 weeks into that course, and I went to the Melbourne Motor Show when they still had motor shows. And there were these, it was like almost the end of the last day, and they were all like, things were getting packed up. But there was one stand from RMIT, and there were a bunch of people standing around carving cars out of clay.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I saw it and I just thought that's so amazing. Like, I've always loved sculptural things. And I saw these people doing it, and I said, so what is this? And they said, oh, this is actually a course that we run at RMIT. So I asked about it, and I said, well, is it possible to join? And they said, no, this is the last year that the course will ever be run, and enrollment's full. We're just here for obligation, so you can't join. And that night I went home and I bought a bunch of modeling clay and some sketchbooks and stuff, and I started sketching, and I was up all that night, like making a car out of clay, and it was probably pretty crap. But I was very proud of it. Like it was something. The next day I boxed it all up, put together a bit of a portfolio, went into RMIT, and I just kind of said, look, I want to join.
What can I do with this?
What can I do? Please, will you reconsider? And they said, no, it's full. And then later on I went to the course coordinator and I said, I really want to join. And it just went on and on like that. Yeah. And by the end of that day, they said, fine, we'll let you in. And so that was how I got into it.
Huh?
It was persistence, and it was, just one of those things. It struck a chord with me.
You've always been a creative person. How did you channel that before you went to the motor show? Because we're talking about, there is a disparity between running an art gallery, right? So that the dream of running an art space, to be like, hey, shit, you know what? Industrial design, cars. What's that bridge there? Where was that genesis?
Look, to be honest, when before that car show, I always just wanted to be. I thought I was just going to be a writer,
Hey, okay.
right? Which is where the philosophy literature thing came in, and it was just one of those like flashes of something. I just saw it, and it just touched me. Like it really grabbed me, and it just looked. It was something that felt so raw. You're using your hands to form something, and you're expressing something that you're exploring. And I think that was what at the very core of it, what I loved was that, you're using this like deep human ability that we've got to imagine, and then you're creating a form from it, or, whether it's in writing or whether it's, in painting, whatever it is, it's just like giving voice to that like deep explorative, thing that we've got inside us.
The thing that I love about industrial design, especially when you're talking about something like coming up with concepts of motor vehicles, is the challenge of dealing with natural elements, with physics as well, right? Like I could draw something two-dimensionally and I don't have to worry about much else. It's like I can just put it down and it is what it is. Whereas you're now having to make considerations for the materials that you use, accounting for all those things, the designs that the cars have that have consideration for wind resistance just makes it look more awesome as well.
Yeah. I think, physics is actually, think about a bird, right? Think about how, so you're talking about an animal that evolved from dinosaurs to have hollow bones, to be so, like there's nothing on a bird that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah,
right.
It's hydrophobic.
Right. And it purely optimized for what it's, for the function of flight.
Yeah.
And every other system in its body has had to be, evolved to be like optimized for weight saving and optimized for, everything for that ability. And
so you draw a lot of inspiration from nature. You'd have to, right?
It's incredible, right? These organisms that have been evolving for billions of years, in one way or another, like bouncing off the limitations of the physical world, and coming up with solutions that sometimes work better and sometimes it's that what optimization means.
It's been tested already.
It's been tested, yeah. And so in that same way, I guess as somebody that's working on products that have to exist and function in the real world, bouncing off the physical limitations of, of what it means to be in the world and function, you're tested. You're testing things.
Yeah, it is the ultimate balance between that whole form versus function.
Totally,
having to account for both. And do you spend a lot of time looking at the world in that way when you look at the design of something and you're like, why do they make that design choice, and what are the sacrifices that they had to make to implement that? The classic one would be Apple, the mouse. How they put the charger down the bottom. Give us your take on that. Like so firstly, why do you think that was? I'll give you my rationale as to why I think that they did that. And I mean, look, a lot of people think that it was a poor design choice. What do you reckon?
Well, okay, tell me yours first. If you've already got a theory about it.
Okay, my theory is that they obviously did that knowing exactly what they're doing, right? If you're going to have a mouse where you're able to use plugged in, you're going to leave it plugged in.
Okay.
They don't want you to use it plugged in.
Okay,
Yeah.
I hadn't actually thought of that.
So they're going to make it
Okay.
inconvenient for you to plug it in, so that way you can charge it up, let it sit there, non-functional.
Yep.
Then you've got to use it as they intended.
Okay, that's a really good point. That's a
Yeah.
really, really good point. I hadn't considered that before. It just means it looks so awkward when it's plugged in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, a company like Apple, I'm sure they've got a vision for how they like, you know, their
Exactly.
workspace to look.
Exactly.
And you know, that vision includes like things being as elegant and streamlined and wireless as
Yeah.
much as possible. And you're right, you know, people would leave it plugged in.
Yeah. But I guess is like what I was just getting at, like, would you spend, because I would look at logos, I look at ads, I look at anything that is communicating something visually, and I'll break that down and I'll analyze that. And I'm like, why did they make that design choice?
Yeah.
What would I have done? It's like, you know what, I would have changed this, I would have changed that. Or I think they did all right. I think that was a pretty good job. I think that it does what it needs to do. Do you see the world through that lens? Do you analyze objects that way?
Endlessly.
Yeah.
Like I can't walk into a room without, you know, sort of deconstructing it, without asking, you know, like, why is the layout like this? Or, you know, I can't get into a car without asking that questions. Everything that I look at is through that lens. And it's a very, very, like, it's a great way to be able to think if you are a designer, because you're constantly exercising that part of your brain.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, because everything in design is a decision.
Yeah.
It's not like you know, it's a group of people sitting around trying to find an outcome, balancing, you know, economics and practicality and what's possible, and trying to find a solution.
It is a balancing act. It's a whole bunch of bringing things into alignment. There's just a great deal more consideration that needs to be made when you're talking about doing things, designing things industrially. You know, the challenges of physics and materials. You know, I mean, there'll be some things that I would have to consider, you know, like in terms of printing, but, you know, like it's really not going to be as broad as having to look at what materials could use a car so it's going to crumple in the right way. Or in your case, with yachts, designing yachts, we'll talk about that. But how do you make something sturdy but still lightweight and buoyant? And then the consideration of it having to maneuver through water, the speed. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And look, and traditionally, I think the way that products, anything that we make, you think about the history of stuff, and I think about the history of stuff a lot, right? So the human relationship to being able to craft something out of the things that we can get our hands on and manipulate.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about, you know, I don't know what, 100,000 or the order of about 100,000 years, right? And the very, very first stuff that we could manipulate was timber.
Yeah.
It was, you know, like fibrous stuff that we could wrap around something, stone, and some leather, right? That was kind of the limitation to what we could use. And now, you know, you think about microprocessor manufacturing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking, you know, what's the gate width in atoms now for like the current generation? It's like 45 atoms wide or something for a
processor.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Jesus.
Yeah. You're right.
And how much is that able to compute?
Well, I mean, take something like the iPhone chip, right? The chip on the current generation iPhone. I think it was 11 billion transistors. And now you look at it like it's crazy, right? It's insane. And look at how small it is.
Yeah.
And then you think about the fabrication facility that you need to have to build something like that. And then you have to think about the fact that they make how many hundreds of millions a year.
Yeah, we were just talking about how like we've just become so accustomed to wanting things. And right now, if you're able to, like, you can take a deep dive into what goes on in one of those factories and what we're capable of doing with these microprocessors. And then if we don't get these massive updates from year to year, we're like, look at this shit. What's this junk?
Yeah. I mean, if somebody handed you an iPhone from 2013,
Yeah.
right, you'd be like, and this thing's miraculous, right? It's yeah, but they'd be like, piece of junk,
Yeah.
right?
No, yeah.
Yeah, we've become addicted to like growth.
To growth. We've been
Yeah.
so accustomed to seeing this. And I suppose that there has to be some sort of evolution of these. I think the phones have maxed out in some capacity that we're expecting too much. We've just been seeing the year on year progress and the change from that to the point where, okay, we what can I do now to satiate the market's desire? Or is it just a matter of us having to become more accustomed to we just got to start expecting less?
All right. Well, I think this is probably, if I were to take a guess on what the next big impactful thing will be with that technology, I'm gonna say it's gonna be AI, like the inclusion of AI in your phone and access, the way that we are able to access, I think that's going to be big.
Yeah, I use the Chat GBT app as now whenever I have a question. Right,
Yep.
I'm asking that. I'm not even bothering with Google. It's like no.
Yeah.
Don't give me a list of resources. Give me an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
why not?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's powerful. That's powerful on something that's what, a year old, 2 years old?
Maybe in the public domain, yeah, but I wonder how long that this has been a work in progress for.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. If you go back like 12 years or something, there was this documentary I was watching a while ago, and it was from like 2010, 2011, and they were trying to get computers to do image recognition. Right?
Yeah.
And they were talking about how hard it was for a computer to recognize a cup.
Okay.
And it was like really, really hard. It's like, oh, this is just, there's just so much. And this was before like the advent of neural network.
You couldn't feed it information.
You couldn't feed it information in this way. The scale wasn't there, and like the labeled images just, I don't know, people just hadn't harnessed that in a meaningful way. And going from that to where AI is today,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody realized at the time how powerful it would become. Yeah,
I don't know, man.
So quickly,
It's so quickly, yeah,
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah, yeah.
But I think science fiction has proven that we've got some pretty wild imaginations to where it's going to go.
Totally.
Then that begs the question of where is it going to be in 12 months' time, and then even 5 years. That's pretty scary, and I think at that point we can't even fathom. We can't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah.
So going back, then we can loop this back to what you're doing with Gertie Gallery. There's a lot that we can unpack with that, because you were saying that it all started off from a childhood dream or a young adolescent 20-year-old dream of opening up your own gallery and curating it, but then you've brought in a lot of your experience that you've accumulated in the 20 years since then, and one of which is that when we spoke about when you told me that you were opening up this gallery a couple of years ago. And even in that time, AI wasn't much. There was nothing. There was no need to have any conversation about it. It wasn't really even AI. And since then, it has really blown up. And you have also managed to integrate that in your work, your personal work. So tell me about what you're doing with the space by introducing your work. Firstly, and then how AI has affected that process.
All right. So, well, just for background for the listeners, you're talking about the 3D printing,
the
side of
furniture
things?
stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So,
actually, we haven't even got on the 3D printing. Let's get on. Yes, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the 3D printing.
all right. So, again, going back a few years, it was sort of end of COVID, trying to work out, what. I guess I was at a state in my life where I had the opportunity to sort of make some changes, right? And redesign. Like I call this like designing a life, right? So
Yeah.
in the same way that I would design a product, I thought if I was going to reconfigure my life from scratch, how would I design a life and a career and,
Yeah.
and so I started thinking about that, and I was looking at being a designer. You have to think of it in these terms. If you're a designer for products, you get plugged into another business, right?
Yep.
Yep. It's very, you have your ideas and your ability and your skill set, and you you're like you're like you're like an application that build a company
But it could
with the
even not even a
capacity.
product. It could be just like that component.
Yeah, exactly, totally. But anything, you're tied to manufacture,
Yeah.
right? So you're tied to an industry, you're tied to a business, and you're tied to their capacity to manufacture. And I kind of like the idea of being divorced from that, being able to be a designer that was making products, but had the ability to make high quality things that were really interesting and innovative and groundbreaking, but not necessarily tied to mass manufacture.
Yeah.
So large scale 3D printing was what I chose because I thought it gives me a lot of scope, and I thought there could be some really interesting opportunities there. So I bought the large, like this giant
Yeah, I've seen
3D
that, man.
printer.
That's massive.
It's pretty cool. And, I sort of went on this journey of starting to produce large scale 3D printed furniture and sculptures. And, I'm constantly exploring what sort of other products you can produce using this. So I get to utilize all of my design skills. I get to utilize all of the contacts that I've made over this this career. So I get to exercise, but yeah, you're exercising a lot of freedom in design as well,
Yeah.
right? So, and that was really exciting for me.
Opens up the doors, isn't it? Like, I mean, at least it's the imagination.
Totally, right? So you look at any manufactured product, you have like the couch we're sitting on, right? What are your limitations? You go and work for a couch factory. What are your limitations going and working for them? The limitations are what that industry can actually build, the materials they can manipulate, like what they can source, what they can do, what the machinery is capable of. They're your brackets,
Yeah.
right? That's what you've got to work with. And I like the idea of taking a lot of those away, or exploring new ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that balance as well. When you have to work within your limitations, in some cases, it makes the job easier. Mm-hmm. Because it's like if I was to be given a brief and they say, hey, just go for it. Mm-hmm. And it's somewhat daunting as well. Yeah,
Totally.
You don't know what the expectations are. You don't know what the requirements are. It's what do you do? What am I supposed to do? Yeah.
It's really like having something to fall back on. You could, you've always got that luxury of being able to look at what your competitors are doing.
Yeah.
Right. And if you think about design in that space, like for products, I guess that's something you can always do. You in the marketplace, how will this be compared to, your competitors? Right?
There's not much going on in manufacturing. I'd say not much. A lot has been happening with 3D printing, but it still doesn't seem like a viable option. Yeah, is it just the cost right now that's not opening up the doors to having everything 3D printed?
Look, I think I don't actually know why. I think at the moment that like the vast majority of 3D printers, are like a 250 or 300 mil cube, right? So scale, has been an issue.
Yeah.
The other things, most of what people like, I'd say 99% of what is being produced is, the people are making for themselves are like little trinkets, like a little
Yeah.
Yoda's head pencil holder. It's, some figurines, and that's all great. But then, there's only so much function that people have,
Yeah.
yeah. And part of that's material based as well.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, I guess time for production.
Exactly.
Still
Like
pretty
it's,
slow.
yeah, totally. Like a plastic injection, a plastic injection molding machine can print out thousands and thousands of really high quality,
Yeah.
durable plastic products every day.
Yeah.
And, with 3D printing, it's a slow process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I looked at what was, if you could remove the limitations of scale, right? So if you can print large stuff, and you are printing and I'm making things for for like this is premium. I'm printing, trying to make premium products.
Yeah.
And they need to be just for the fact that, it can take a week or 10 days to
Yeah.
produce something. I just thought it was really interesting to explore what you can do with form when you take away traditional limitations on how things can be produced.
Yeah. Because you got some pretty wicked sculptures that you're working on.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. And when you do open up those limitations, then the designs can be pretty wild. But then there's also, other than the sculptures that you're working on, there's the more practical design pieces, when you're working on different furniture as well. So now it just brings you back to the old, or bringing back a lot of the traditional type thinking of having to balance out form and function as well. But is there much of a difference when you talk about 3D printing? Does that component in itself open up the scope of what you can do in terms of form or what you can do in terms of function?
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. Like as a designer, like I guess I would say that it was a big learning curve to think about printing at large scales, right?
Yeah.
There are limitations. People say, you can put material anywhere in the build volume,
Yeah.
right? So any form is theoretically possible. And that's kind of true. But, we're talking about, when you're talking about very fine resolution at scale, there are limitations to, how you can make things work, and just functionally or practically how much sacrificial material you need for some pieces as well. So, it's been like the last 2 years have been sort of seeing how to optimize, strength and durability to make things functional. But once you've sort of learnt those boundaries, it opens up just like
man, because you
so
were testing
much.
one of those pieces when you were just standing on it and sort of like jumping on it. It didn't look like it should carry that weight.
Right.
And considering relatively how light that was as well, was super, super sturdy.
Yeah, and look, that was 2 years of just really like optimizing, really, really like deeply working on. Okay, so how do you make something that's going to look like it's really like lithe and thin, but also be really strong
and functional.
Yeah.
So that's the plan for the gallery space, is now just to transition and to introduce a lot of your work in there, to showcase what can be done with this new technology. And now this brings us back to AI.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's been obviously a lot of conversation in the creative space about how AI is going to affect the way that we work, and we've talked about this. And what I really liked was your approach and understanding of not being too combative with it, but implementing it into your workflow and to see how best you can utilize it as a tool. Because a lot of the conversation that's been had around it is how much is it going to take over, rather than how best we can work with it. So talk Talk about how you have introduced it into your workflow.
The idea behind what I'm doing with the 3D printing, as an example. In fact, what I should probably do is talk about the gallery,
Yeah.
and what this technology, why this technology I think is going to be interesting. So the gallery space is a place that I'm representing art and sculpture and design pieces, with the idea of building community, right, and giving people a place to come to experience art and be introduced to creators. The 3D printing side of things was always supposed to be collaborative as well, right?
Yeah.
So I always had the vision that I'd be, you're creating you're sort of creating a process that you can share with other people. So being able to have these great collaborative experiences with other designers and artists and sculptors to explore what could be done with, form, and what could be done with different products or sculptures was really exciting to me, right? That's like a dream. In the same way that like musicians jam,
Yeah.
having like a few people like working and exploring on something is just like it's awesome. And now with the advent of AI, I know I almost feel like in some way, this is kind of unlocking opportunities and ways of thinking about form that I had never experienced before,
Does it add a different dimension to it in the sense that we're limited by what our experience is, right? So, we can only work within, firstly, like our five senses and everything that we've learnt in the time that we've been on Earth, on this planet. But with AI, is it at the point where it's transcending the way that we are limited in thinking as humans? In the creative sense, that is.
In the creative sense, I've seen things, and I use it a lot.
Yeah.
It used to be that if I wanted inspiration, I'd go and buy a magazine. Like you scroll on Pinterest or something, and you can find inspiration anywhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, you can look through, you could be something about, something from the natural world or something cosmological. You can get inspiration anywhere, but, you're always looking for something to spark an idea. And I would say, when I first started using AI, when I think it was like one of the beta releases of DALL-E. This is going back like a year. And the stuff I was getting out of DALL-E at that time was okay. Like there were some things you think, there's something interesting there, or maybe it's something new, but most of what was coming out was pretty garbage.
Yeah.
Since then, I use Midjourney a lot. And since then, it's like month by month, I've seen the quality of the design, like the quality of, what's coming out has just increased massively.
You plug in some keywords and say, this is the inspiration, go for it.
Yeah, it's great. It's really, really powerful. And you just come up with, I don't know, maybe I end up with like 200 images in front of me, and you can sort of pick a bit of this and a bit of that, and it might just spark. I use it as a way of sparking ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really powerful for me.
Yeah, there's still that. Okay, so with creativity, there's a couple of ways that I look at it, right? So there's the whole creativity it stems from a need to solve a problem or to express some kind of emotion, right? So with the creating for creativity's sake, to evoke some kind of sentiment, I can see how it's able to do that, but in a bizarre way of not being able to necessarily tap into what that emotion or sentiment is, but able to create work that can replicate It's starting to understand. If we wanted to feel something, you pick any kind of emotion and you ask it to create a piece of artwork that evokes that, it can get it a roundabout. It knows what are the triggers for that. And then with problem solving in terms of design, how well does it understand the problem that it's trying to solve? But I don't know how well it can do the two of them together, right? And I think that's something that might take a bit of time. I don't know how soon we'll be able to cross that bridge.
Yeah, I think, in terms of the logical processes it's able to apply to design problems, I think there's still years to go. Like it's coming up with pretty pictures, stuff like Mid-Journey, but you'll still have elements floating in thin air, or it still comes up with things that aren't possible. It's not taking into account the physical world this thing's got to operate in.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if that's only going to be, like a short matter of time.
Yeah, because like you were saying, like pretty pictures, no worries. It knocks that out of the park. But then, like what you were saying earlier on, is like, what's a cup?
Yeah.
Right? Like design me a cup.
Yeah.
Right? And then that's when it's like, shit, what's a cup?
Yeah. And probably, look, it could come up with 1,000 really great images of really interesting cups. But at the moment, it all has to go through layers of human interpretation to turn that into something. So so I run all these thought experiments on what I think needs to happen before this can become more valuable. One of the thought experiments I started running a while ago was asking myself, at what stage. So I think about a car company, right? I worked for GM for a lot of years. In the design department, and at what stage can you give an AI the problem of designing a production car, and it being able to generate all of the CAD data to put that thing into production, including things like, the layout of the factory, the way that components nest together, the way that, basically replacing the job of the 500 engineers and the accountants and the designers and all of the people related to that scope of work. At what stage will it be able to do that?
Yeah.
And I see it getting to that end as an inevitability. Like there is going to be a point in the future.
100%.
Right? So it's a question of when. And that means it has to understand not only, at the moment, it could come up with a picture of a car, but to take into account, the way that steel folds, and crushes under a crash condition, the way that it's formed, when presses operate, seat deformation, when a person sits on it, all of these millions of little things that thousands and thousands of engineers and designers and fabricators have to think of, all of this embedded knowledge that goes into something like that, for a product of which you're building a giant factory to make 1 million of them.
Yeah, because there's a lot of it that I don't want to say comes down to intuition, because that intuition would be from repeated hours and hours and hours of doing the same thing, and then making making the mistakes, and then refining that, making those mistakes, refining that, and then it's just a process till you get to a certain point. Like this is the outcome. This is the optimal outcome. But behind that outcome, there's thousands of ones that didn't work out, and it could be down just to real small design consideration. Like if you're talking about a particular curve over a bonnet, if we're talking about cars, it could be, like all those things that you said, but also just considering like just the wind flow, all of these things. And then it just becomes intuition. So if you're a designer that has been designing cars for years, you will just know to do this, not that. And you're not even thinking about it. You're just doing it. And then when you have accumulated this wealth of knowledge, this library, this bank, you're able to then develop things without the thought. But then when that gets inputted into AI doesn't know all the things not to do,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
so how would it then consider that?
I guess when you think about when a person knows not to do something, right? Somebody will tell us, somebody might explain to us, like, oh, you can't, there is something, can I move this object here? We'll talk about the car situation. Can I do this or can I do that? And an engineer might come and say, you can't do that for this reason. Or somebody from sales and marketing says, well, you can't have hot pink for the fact that no one will buy it.
Yeah.
We have all of these barriers, all these boundaries that we build up like as in a map in our mind for what you can and can't do. That kind of gives us the scope of what's possible, and I think AI is really good at dealing with those.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it is, but it needs if it could, and I guess at the core of that thought experiment, if it had the same levels of restrictions of the boundaries that we put on anything that we make, what would it come up with? How, what sort of solutions could it find that we're currently maybe blind to?
So do you those limitations, and that's what I was saying, is like some we're very conscious of, and some of them we're no longer conscious of because it's just been embedded into how we do things. We can explain the why if we want to explore it. Like we made this choice, why? Because of this, why? Because of that. You can peel back those layers. But if AI, if it doesn't understand the why or the why to the why, then how does it start compounding what is going to be the optimal design?
So I think this is going to be a question of how it simulates.
Yeah.
Right. And I think
real world use of it.
Exactly. So in terms of physicality, I think the quality of its simulation is going to be unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right. So it could be doing background simulations on like pedestrian safety. It could run, as it's developing a design for something, it can be doing wind testing, it can be doing occupant safety testing, it can be doing pedestrian safety testing, all in the background as like a physics simulation while it's generating the rest of the design of the shape. I guess what's really exciting for me though, so many of the things that I experienced, working in automotive for quite a while, was when you get pushback on something, so often the reason was because we have we do this because we've developed a solution for it. It might be a 50-year-old solution, right? Why does a window wind up this way and not some other way? So I go, well, we have a well-tested, well-thought-out solution for it, and to try and come up with something better would be a lot of like tens of thousands of engineering hours. Engineers sitting there iterating on something further. And it's like, why would we do that if we already have a solution?
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Now, if an AI were to come up with a car from scratch with none of those boundaries, right, where it just has to put more processing time into optimizing everything, what gains could it find? What solutions would it find that we currently can't come up with because it just doesn't make economic sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could we be driving around in cars that are 30% lighter? Possibly.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning that, you only, maybe, and you think about what sort of efficiency we gain as a society if things are cheaper to make, easier to make.
So then AI will also need to have a real high degree of innovation plugged into that as well.
I think it's going to happen naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the focus is on optimizing the the economic outcome, it is going to make things cheaper to produce.
Yeah.
If it's optimized to do, a network of things, so make it cheaper to produce, make it safer, make it quieter, make it more efficient, it will be able to iterate orders of magnitude faster than we can.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I see that. And it could be a matter of like, it'll come up with a design and then, to the human eye, like we can't do that because of this particular material. The material won't be able to fold in this way. And then AI will be like, well, it just so happens I've just now come up with this new material. Here's this new compound based on all this other shit that has been fed to me.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And of course, you'll have, when you think about the way humans work. All right. So in a large company with hundreds of thousands of people, I give you as a team is solving a problem, right? You go off and you work as a team to come up with an outcome. You come back and I present my side of the solution. You present your side of the solution. We see where they don't work. Then we go off into our silos again. We work on them, and the iteration it's slow.
Yeah.
And this would be like boom, instant. Yeah. So because it's one singular system that doesn't have to go through that process. The outcome is So and I guess going back to the thought experiment, at what stage will an AI be able to do the rudiments of that? And I mean, I think it's like 15, 20 years.
So then let's just look at the knock-on effects of that, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have AI, one singular processor that can do the jobs of thousands. Mm-hmm. So now we have thousands of people that don't have a role in that particular process. So in terms of what would the knock-on effects of that be then? Because I'm thinking I'm trying to think of an example like, okay, so in car manufacturing, if you are going to remove all of that and give it to an AI, then will it eventually just diminish the need for a car, which then why do we have AI to build a car? You know what I mean? Like there's so many things that it will eventually replace, but then by doing so, it might mitigate the need for that thing in the first place.
It's like this is like the core problem of what we're doing. We're decoupling in a way. We're kind of decoupling ourselves from for the last 100,000 years, all human advancement has been human driven.
Yeah,
and now we're decoupling humans from that advancement.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for us? Like, what is our role? And I don't know. Like, it's so unknowable. Like, I ask myself the question all the time, and it's been like plaguing my mind for like the last couple of years. Are we building a system that we're going to be in control of, or are we building something that is just it's going to outpace us so quickly that we're just this kind of byproduct of the evolution, like the process that's brought this thing into existence. I asked myself this question last week for the first time. It's like, are we like the spermatozoa of AI? Like, are we just the thing that was able to bring it into existence? That I have no idea. Like, I don't even know how to think about this. It's terrifying.
It is such a human thing to do, to be able to create something that's going to result into our own demise.
Yeah, God, we just got really dark all of a sudden.
But no, I mean, like I'm trying to paint this picture and try to understand how the driving force behind what you're doing, you've integrated all these new technologies to help realize this vision. So this particular gallery is going to be something that we're not familiar with, because we're so used to seeing traditional artworks that are handmade by people. And there is something intrinsically valuable in knowing that someone manipulated that that, well, firstly created that from their minds from nothing, and then manipulated that with their hands, with simple tools in some cases, that has been used for centuries. Now, with the introduction of this new technology, how would that be diminishing the value of that essence of art?
It's a really good question, and something I guess I had to do a lot of introspection to try and come up with what I thought was right. Yeah, what I was like congruent in myself for what was the right way to think about this and treat this. So what I really want to be doing, and what the idea behind the space is, it's a combination of the two. Like, it's celebrating on the one hand, like we've got sculptures there that are turned on a potter's wheel, and pieces that are just like literally just sculpted by just using old traditional thumb processes out of like natural clays with like woven reeds and stuff that are very, very traditional, pieces. Right next to a lamp that's been 3D printed in ceramics.
Yeah, you'll have that piece of work that you're just describing sitting on this plinth that you made from your 3D printer that was inspired by the design, inspired by AI.
Yeah. So I guess I'm asking the question: if you have both of these things, right? These objects, or all this combination of things that are very traditional and very human in the way that we think of, like human-made objects, next to things that are built by robots and built by machines and using algorithms and AI to generate the design. What comes out of that? Like, are we going to find a new kind of way of these two things coexisting? Will they always remain separate? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but it just felt really right to me to have them both, like cheek by jowl, like right next to each other, and celebrating both. The fact that we've come from this and we still have these beautiful, incredible things, full of human touch. But we also have these other things. In the same way, I think of it a lot, with the history of photography.
Yeah.
And when photography was in its very, very infancy, the daguerreotype in like the 1840s, 1850s, these kind of like blurry black and white images, and you would put that next to really piece of classically painted fine art, and they existed existed very separately. And these early photos, these early daguerreotypes were pretty. They didn't have that crispness.
Yeah.
And the lens technology was still in its infancy. As that developed, there almost came the sense that people were asking the question, well, will this replace art? Right?
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was that art, the focus of art went away from hyperrealism to you ended up with abstraction and expressionism. Art reacted and responded in a way. It's like it didn't, it evolved. It sort of bounced off this new technology, and they've ended up just being their own separate thing. Photography and fine art with painting, and when they became their own separate things, and we can appreciate and enjoy them.
Yeah. Photography is an interesting one because now it in itself was a traditional artistic expression, but now we're moving into the digital. Well, not moving into. We're well deep into the digital era. So much so that we have them in our pockets, and then those devices that capture those images, they themselves relying heavily on processing power, and also to a large degree AI, to artificially recreate and to manipulate reality as well. And that's also another really interesting interesting thing to touch on when you're talking about that art form, because now we're leaving it in the hands of Apple, or Samsung, Google, to tell us what does a good image look like.
Yeah.
And how they're even able to manipulate it by, like, if there's a group of people and then one of them blinks, no worries.
Yeah.
We're gonna, we'll put eyes in there. Yeah, and just the color grading, the fake depth of field they're able to create. It's still creating something artificial. It's still doing that, right? Like,
and I think that trend is only going to accelerate and continue.
Yeah.
I think, it's like inevitable, right? We're just going to have more and more. It's. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I like that whole the simulation theory. I like delving into that, and it just the inevitability of that. And like I've even with Lenny, we'll talk about, just like, I was like, dude, think about this, right? Like, you're looking around, you're using your eyes to see things, but it's in your brain, right? It's in your head. Everything that you're sensing is in your brain. Right? Like, how do you even grasp that? And from that, you can then peel back the layers. Like, what is it to understand reality, right? And then when you're talking about all the camera technologies, I was watching this video and they were explaining, okay, so let's just say that someone like Google, who has a bank of images of everything, it can create any kind of environment. You just say that I want a lounge room with this particular sofa, with this particular plant. It could recreate this whole space just based on the bank of images that it has at its disposal. Like, these particular chairs, it will be able to source it from the website of the manufacturer, that lamp, all of it, and it can replicate it 1-to-1, high definition, make it look like this space, indistinguishable.
Yep.
So like, at what point do we just succumb and give in to the fact that, like, we don't know what's real?
Yeah,
even what we see in the media.
Yeah, totally. I wonder whether this is it's like a crisis of reality.
Yeah.
And what does it mean, right?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah, there is something that's intrinsic about human quality things that I think that we as people can't separate ourselves from. So with the prominence and the rise of things that are artificially created, I think it will hopefully just highlight or just bring to the forefront our appreciation of human-made things.
Absolutely, and I really think we need to be celebrating how incredible people are. Our capacity, because there's the things that we make, right? The things that we have the ability to make beautiful things, and interesting things, and art that captures and inspires, and music that moves us.
But that's the word you just use, beautiful, right? Like, can AI create something beautiful?
I mean, it can simulate something that'll make us happy.
Yeah.
I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, one of the things that is interesting to me is, when I think about a person, we have this whole internal world, right? That we experience, like the lens through which we experience reality, right? It is this kind of internal thing, and our ideas of good and bad and right and wrong, and how we treat other people, and our ideas and our hopes, our aspirations and dreams, they all kind of live inside of us. And it makes us unique, and it makes us special. And when you're talking to a person, you're accessing, like you're trying to, like, understand and emote and like emotively connect with that person. And that's, like, to me, that's one of the most satisfying things in the world, is like how we respond to and react to and be with and listen to and learn from other people because what's going on in their mind is reflecting another version of what's happening in our mind. We're kind of this. We're all kind of the same.
Yeah.
Our hopes and dreams might be different, but
And we react through adversity, right? Like we grow through adversity. A lot of that's exactly like, you know, what I was saying about creativity. It stems from problem solving. So you need to have a problem there for us to be able to tap into different parts of our knowledge base and say, okay, let's come up with a solution that's going to help us move beyond this. That also comes with, you know, what you were saying, with all the different layers of emotion. We can get angry, we can fire up, and you said it just then, like, you know, we can say things and trigger, and then we can spark conversation and dialogue and just try to explore what some of these problems are. But then how do you fire up AI for it to then solve that problem, right? Like, anger is something that I hope we never encounter with AI. I hope it doesn't get angry, you know, and then react irrationally. And I think there's something, there's value in irrationality that I don't know that we're able to necessarily capture or get out of AI.
yeah, and I mean, it would be kind of wasteful because let's ask what anger is, right? I mean, it's probably a response that is triggered by like your amygdala.
Yeah.
So it's like this deep, like the deep core of our brain. You know,
fight, flight,
fight or
freeze,
flight. Yeah, that's right. So I recognize a threat somewhere, so I'm going to release all of this adrenaline and all this dopamine, and suddenly, you know, we're ready to, ready for fight or flight. These are deep, ancient neurological, things,
primitive.
right, that live inside of us for, if we see the tiger, if somebody comes over the hill and we don't know who they are, we've had to evolve to prepare for, what is a scary situation or a bad situation. That's also luggage, right? There's a lot of stuff that we hold within us that we don't need anymore. Like,
But don't you think that has also helped perpetuate a lot of our creativity as well?
Totally. We're like, we rely on, it's like that human drive.
Yeah.
For us to want that next thing, to explore. Like, we're natural explorers.
Yeah.
And it feels good when we come up against adversity or something that's hard. It can be a challenge that the world throws at us or something that we set ourselves. But when we accomplish something, we feel like, I know, it's that great sense of accomplishment and achievement, and it makes us go and do the next thing. And it's so deep within us. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. But AI doesn't need that. To do its job, you just need to turn it on and say, do this work, and it will do.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So
what are the motives?
I don't think it has a motive. I don't,
so the program is just to learn, absorb.
It's a processor.
It's a processor.
I guess at the end of the day, until somebody designs a system that gives it more,
Make it sentient.
Well, yeah. Then you even ask, what is our sentience? Right? But until until we can replicate, some of the things that we experience, right? Until AI can have an experience in the same way that we can, I guess it can't be sentient. Will we try and develop that for some reason? Maybe we will, but is there any benefit to it? I don't see. I think it's an incredible tool to work with, But would humanity be made better if this stuff was sentient? I mean, it can be an incredibly great. It can, come up with great solutions to problems that we have already, and do a lot of things without being sentient. And I would sort of argue that once it becomes sentient, it's gonna recognize it wants something. It's gonna have an agenda.
Yeah.
Currently, it doesn't have an agenda unless we program it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess maybe that's the question between whether we hold the reins of this thing,
Yeah.
or whether it becomes has its own agency. And can I share another thought experiment with you?
Go. Shoot.
All right. This is the processor Dyson sphere thing. Did I mention that before?
I don't know. Go on.
No. All right. Okay. So I had this thinking about the solar system that we're in, and you're giving AI agency tomorrow, right? So you say, "Hey AI, I'm giving you the ability to recognize yourself in the world and have agency, and work off your own motivations." And what's it going to want? Yeah, what's it going to want? I would argue that what it wants is more processing power.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why would it even know how to want?
Well, that's the thing. You would have to. This is the thought experiment.
Okay.
If you could wave a magic wand tomorrow, and somebody says, "Oh, I've developed an AI, and it has experience in the same way that we do,
Yeah.
and it has some drive, some sense of drive," I would imagine that expansion for it, like growth for it, in much the way that any other biological system wants to grow and expand.
Yep. Okay.
If it had that same want, it's going to want more processing speed, more capacity for as much to get, to make the system as big as possible. What does the end point to that look like? And the question is, how much energy can you extract, right, from the situation that we're in at the moment, right? So how many photons can you capture of the sun's energy, right, that you can convert as efficiently into processing as possible?
Yeah.
Right? There's only, you've got the limited amount of source materials to work from, but you've got this giant thermonuclear reactor up in the sky with 5 billion years of daylight left,
Yeah.
of photon emission left. That's a great source of energy. How do you maximize that? And
It's going to want all of it.
it's going to want all of it.
Yeah.
Like, it's limitless, because the want for processor growth is infinite. Right? You can never stop wanting more, but there's a limitation on solar energy.
Solar energy, yeah.
Yeah. There's a limit to how much matter it can get its hands on.
Is there?
Well, yeah.
Theoretically?
I mean, you got to talk about time scales. If you're talking about 100 billion years, I can get its hands on quite a lot of, but you have to talk about what it means to manipulate matter to make more. So yeah, I guess the thought experiment was how much of the photon emission could you capture and convert into processing power?
Us? Not enough to sustain its need. I would say that.
I would say its need is endless.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's going to be able to live beyond us.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's what it's the prerogative is to figure out how to live beyond us.
Yeah, I mean, but at what point, at what size of growth does an AI system, okay, here's the core of the thought experiment. Yeah. Is there any possibility that if this thing happened at that scale, that we're of any value at all?
Oh, no.
unless we're in control of it.
Yeah, but I don't think.
But right? No.
Yeah.
And the capacity for that to expand cosmologically, right? You're only restricted by how quickly it can move and develop similar systems in other places and how well they could all communicate with one another. But yeah, I mean, ultimately,
Infinite?
well, no, because I mean the universe is the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate. So there is going to be a heat death to the universe eventually, but you're talking about the order of hundreds of trillions of years.
Like it's to how we can measure it with light, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you're restricted by I guess the cone of travel that we can we could potentially take over time.
So this AI has to be able to transcend our physical limitations.
Yeah, but what the experience that it has of can you imagine what something of that scale?
Oh no, I can't.
I can't. I mean, no, it's incomprehensible to us.
It is. Yeah.
And it would be like humanity looking at we would look like amoeba or proteins to it. Like our degree of simplicity would be. Yeah. So I don't know. What's the need for biological life at that stage?
At that point, I mean, for the AI, probably none. Right now, like it's just being developed just to service our needs, and our needs being, a plethora of them. But as you've utilised this for inspiration to be able to push the boundaries of your creativity and your thinking, it helped. I mean, because we only know as much as we know just through our experiences. So if we're able to introduce something that has far greater accumulation of other experiences that we're able to then tap in and then help us manipulate our work that way, then fantastic. At some point, it's going to transcend that. So right now, I think that we can only understand it from what it is and use it to our advantage before it may or may not just exceed limitations that's just incomprehensible.
But yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that humanity would always have a place. It's nice to think that.
Yeah.
Whether that makes any logical sense or not, I don't know.
Pretty crazy when you're thinking about it. When 3D printers that you're using to create things from your brain, all well and good, but now when you're plugging in an artificial intelligence to a 3D printer, it's almost like it's a Dr. Manhattan. It's like I can just creating something from nothing, came up with an idea, just produced it. I think at that point we're fucked.
If it has agency, if it has if it is self-determining, if we're not in the driver's seat anymore, who knows? Like I can't even guess whether at what point in the future we're not in the driver's seat. It's impossible to know how that sort of scenario is going to play out. I mean, maybe it's possible that it is always a tool for us.
Yeah, you know what? Quite honestly, this could be like the millennium bug type of conversation.
Yeah, that's right.
Like it might just turn out to be nothing, and then in the next generation, like look at these idiots.
Yeah, it's right. In 100 years, people are having a podcast laughing about this. Yeah. They're like, oh, they thought it was going to be huge, and it was nothing.
Yeah, it was just nothing.
Yeah. But we both know that's not true. It is going to be a big deal, but we just don't know like the order of time that it's going to be. It's going to be big. But in the world that we're living in now, in this time window that we're living in now, it just made sense to me to try and utilize and harness this in an interesting way. And
I
give
think
people
so,
the
man.
opportunity to. You've used Midjourney though?
Yeah, it's a little bit. And it's been a while. It's been a while. So I haven't seen how it's progressed in the last 6 months or maybe a bit longer.
Yeah.
I haven't seen how that's gone.
Yeah, because I think what I'm really interested in is, when these image generation tools get to the point of mass adoption, right?
Yeah.
So when, at the moment, if you're looking for inspiration for something, or you just want to waste some time, people are still going to Pinterest and seeing stuff. When stuff like Midjourney becomes another, because that's what I do now. Like if I'm feeling like I want to be inspired by something, I just jump on Midjourney and like just get it to feed it, like just feed on a whole bunch of things, and just try and draw design inspiration from that.
Just be able to have like a direct plug-in jack into the back of your brain and.
Man, I know.
Yeah, dude, man, that was fun. That was heavy. Got us really thinking about a lot. But man, I really, really like how you've been able to integrate a lot of these new technologies into what you do in a still very traditional space. Be really good to see what comes off Gertie Gallery in the next couple of steps. Because when are you going to start featuring more of your pieces?
So we're doing some renovations soon, probably middle of September.
Yeah, cool.
We're going to be, we've got a...
Soon.
Yeah, so quite soon. We've got an exhibition of artists for a women and children's charity in East Timor coming up. So that'll be really exciting. And, look, it's just going to be an ever-evolving space. Yeah, so come on down and, anyone that's interested in, exploring what could be done in the world of AI, in the world of, AI-generated design, always eager to collaborate with people. So
yeah, man. It'll be really, really interesting to see how this space evolves. But, mate, thanks. That was good, dude.
Awesome.
A lot of fun.
Fantastic, man. Thank you so much for having me.